Kanshi Sumbayi, Chenda Tumbalaname, Jawatin Jinjabunjum, Sishin Tumbatalande. Revered monks and nuns, Mr. Principal Sunawandu, and other principals, learned principals and teachers, and all the people present in this gathering. I offer my greetings and good wishes to you all. Today is the full moon day of the 5th month of the Kalachakra calendar. So it is a auspicious and a good day to do meaningful interaction. I have been asked to talk about the true teacher, and at the same time the medium of communication would be English. So that makes much difficult for me, because English is a language which I never learned. On the contrary, I resisted for a long time to speak. Nevertheless, at the end I have to use this for many purposes. So I may not be able to express myself fully through this language. If there is some difficulty and unclarity, you may interrupt me and ask directly. The subject we choose for our discussion this afternoon is a very vast and also profound and difficult one. I am afraid we may be able to do justice in an hour's conversation. Yet I will try to touch some points which are mentioned in our ancient Indian wisdom about this literature, which may be well to consider by the teaching and principal community. Actually, the invitation letter written by Mr. Principal Sunawandu made little easier for my task, because he already recognized the challenges. So I need not to dwell with the challenges with which we are struggling and going to be more difficult in the future. So these challenges are well recognized by the host. So that makes more easier for me to deal with the subject. To point out the more important points which he have raised in the invitation letter was regarding about need of the faculty of discernment among the people, and also the rapid change which is taking place in the world during the past and present century, and ever increasing materialism. Of course, materialism has different ways of interpretation, but as a whole the materialism is one of the challenges. And the consumerism, then finally he concluded the problem as a separation and distancing between the hand and heart in the metaphor. That's a good metaphor. The present modernity, we are living in the social system of postmodern. Western people usually call it as a postmodern civilization. I always hesitate to call it as a civilization. Civilization means not a crowd of people, but perfect relationship and meaningful relationship between people and harmonious living is called society. But the postmodern social system is encouraging comparison and competition. And wherever competition exists, there cannot be harmonious relationship. Because in competition one has to be gainer and the other has to be loser. So by this way, in today's society, everyone is a competitor, not a collaborator, even among the friends and family members, even among the classmates. They always see the people as a competitor. Competitor always aim for one is winning. Yes, that's better. It's better. That means the self need to be the winner and the other need to be the loser. And by this way, the basic need of human relationship, the equality, is always lost. In such circumstances, to call this society or to call the civic system as a civilization, it is kind of de-civilizing. Each one is put to a part of struggle and a part of competitor or fighter. Anyhow, we have come to the topic of the teacher, the true teacher. Before going to the discussion on the topic, I would like to mention few background things to facilitate you to deal with my summation more easily. The first, the language problem, which I already mentioned. And the second, I am still living in the civilization of 7th century with the ancient Indian tradition of Nalanda and their way of life. So a person who is living in a 7th century civilization may not have the capacity to dialogue or to interact with the advanced people who are living in the postmodern civilization. In this case, I am a kind of uncivilized, a savage person who have not touched by education. I am totally uneducated person in real sense of the word, education. Of course, in a traditional way, I received a little bit of shiksha. Shiksha does not substitute the education as we call today. So that means this evening's conversation and dialogue is between uneducated and educated people. So can we able to truly communicate with each other? That is questionable. Because I didn't introduce myself before touching to the point, you may not be having some kind of misunderstanding. Particularly the past speakers, by way of introducing me, they have exaggerated many things, so you should not be carried away by this kind of introduction. Sometimes I jokingly used to say that, fortunately, I am uneducated, so that may not be very polite word, but I do think in that way. Having said that, the second most important thing is I am not giving you a teaching, neither I am advising you or suggesting you or guiding you something. I do not have the qualification or the capacity to do such things. What I am submitting to you at this time is a presentation of an idea, a concept or notion which was coming from the Buddha, the Gautama, and continued the tradition from India, and from India went to Tibet, and Tibet was have the opportunity to preserve it for the last more than 1300 years, and now we are trying to re-establish in the land of its origination, the Ayurveda Bharatvarsh. So we are, under the leadership of His Holiness, making efforts to re-establish the Indian ancient tradition back to the soul of India. And in that journey, the traditional Buddhist people of India on the Himalayan regions, like Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Bhutan, all these Himalayan region whose mother tongue is Bhoti Bhasha, and able to follow the Buddhist canon, the Kanjur and Tenjur, have more and great responsibility for the reviving of ancient Indian Buddhist culture and spiritual tradition back to the land of India. Your generation, your coming generations, has an enormous universal responsibility to do this great venture. Teacher is a common word which might have different connotations with different language, nationalities, time, or cultural differences, but the teacher word is used to a person who gives a knowledge from oneself to other, and that is called teacher. And in the spiritual realm or in the dharmic realm, in India, guru is the word for teacher. The word guru is used by all different traditions or philosophical groups of the ancient Indian people. Guru and Shishya, or Guru and Chela, teacher and student, this was used. But in the Buddhist canon, there are number of different ways to use the word. We do not always use for every teacher. For example, in Vinay, for different dissemination of spiritual tradition, there are different words such as Acharya, Upadhyaya, or Sadhabir, something like that. When it reaches to the Pramitayana, the Guru is also used, but they are different words. The alternative word is Kalyan Mitra. Kalyan Mitra is referring to a teacher, but the different usage word is that a teacher must not appear as superior than the student, or some kind of authority, or instructor, director. On the contrary, a co-learner who can work with the student in the journey of learning, and a collective learning process can be adopted. So therefore, I sometimes use to say that a true teacher is a true student, true learner, lifelong learner and co-learner with student is in reality a true teacher. I'll come to that later on, but it is in a way we can say like that. The word Kalyan Mitra is only a Buddhist usage. All the other Indian traditions, philosophical sects do not use this. Of course, the word is there, but that's only referring to a friend, not a teacher. This is only used by Buddhist teacher and Buddhist canon. Therefore, as I mentioned before, we have to define what does mean by the word of teacher. As I mentioned before, in my view, the teacher can be defined in person who is more able to learn the subjects, the vidyas, the sciences, the arts, more than the student. Yet, ready to learn, search, research, argue, dialogue, trying to realize the subject from many different viewpoints, many different ways with the student. That kind of person is termed as teacher. Shiksha refers to a process of learning. Process of learning does not limit it to accumulation of informations. In the Buddhist tradition, the process of learning has 3 stages. The first is hearing, and the second is contemplating. The third is meditating. The first thing, the beginning of learning starts from the process of hearing. Process of hearing means hearing from a teacher, a guru, or reading from texts. These are process of hearing. Tujung Vishrup, a wisdom accumulated by hearing or reading. And this kind of accumulation of information, the understanding of information is considered to be not self-knowledge, but is a borrowed knowledge, either borrowed from teacher or from the text or from other process of learning. There's not a self-knowledge and also not a authentic knowledge. Pramanic, it does not mean pramanic. Then whatever you acquire the knowledge from hearing, from reading, you have to analyze it through your own contemplation, search, research, and examine it through different ways of rational and logic. In Buddhist canon, there are 4 kinds of logic systems, and among them, the Karya-Karni logic is more important. From reason to prove the objective by rational way. And it will take a long time to realize what you have acquired the information from the hearing is authentic or it is wrong. That is, we call it Samdong Rinpoche, the knowledge acquired by one's own analyzation and searching. Then what you have reached to a conclusion and understanding that have to be meditated so that you can realize it internally. Realizing internally is the real knowledge, authentic knowledge. There will be no space for mistaking or misleading. So what remained only up to the hearing alone, that is not a thing you can say, I know, but you just accept it. Acceptance and knowing is a different thing. Today, the problem is whatever is taught by a teacher or whatever is mentioned in the textbook, the students begin to accept it, taking for granted, and there's no process of self-analyzation. And therefore, it can be wrong, it can be right, whatever it may be, but you have no knowledge of it, you just accept it. In Indian language, Hindi language is more easy, jana or mana. Jana is to know, mana is to be accepted. Some people who have gone through the process of learning, experimentation, analyzation, searching, researching, and find some reality by his or her own effort, and then that is shared with other people. So we are just accepting them without, by one's own process of learning or realizing it internally, then that can be found mistakenly or untruth later on. Or you may not be able to communicate it to others in an authentic way because you just accept it, not you have realized by yourself, and you have no personal or authentic knowledge. So therefore, all these three processes, the teacher shall have to be collaborate with the student for the first two stages, the hearing process and the analyzing process, in which the teacher and taught both have to go together and work together jointly. And when it comes to the meditative stage, then that shall have to be done individually. Because inner process of mind cannot be collaborate unless until you achieve a high level of spiritual attainment. So at an ordinary level that will not be possible individually to realize it through meditative process. And to do this collaborate of learning process with the student, the teachers shall have to be certain quality or qualifications. And these qualifications are being described by the Buddha for different stage of learning or different stage of teaching. For a teaching of secular subjects or even spiritual subjects belonging to Pramitayana, they are considered to be 10 basic qualifications to become a real teacher. I may use it, a true teacher. Buddha have mentioned it in many sutras, and which was summed up by Maitrinath in the Sutra Alankar. Shinye Tulwa Shiva Nirshiva Yunden Laba Zunje Longchu Dini Rabdo Tola Makeden Zvedani Juaponaten. So these 10 qualities are absolutely necessary to become a true teacher. The first is humbleness, Chinye Tulva, and the second is peaceful, Shiva. The third is stable mind, Nyur Shiva. Stable mind means a mind which is based on discriminative wisdom. That is stable mind. These three are the most important for a teacher. Then the fourth is Yundanlaba. Better knowledge of a subject which is to be taught to the student. You must have a better knowledge than the student. Then you must be a hard worker. The fifth is hard worker. You might have to teach 24 hours, yet you are still able to do it. So this kind of hard working. Lungkichu, you must have all kind of information and references for that particular subject. Different views, different treatises, or different way of interpretation. You should have information, all of that. Teniram Tola. These two ways of interpretation. You must have the final and authentic knowledge of the subject which is to be taught, or you understand the reality of the things. Either of these things are the different way of interpretation. Then the next is skillful speaker, good language, good command of language, and you must know what kind of language will be more easily understandable by the student. And using all kind of vocabulary, yet you are able to communicate to the student through the artistic way of talking or using the language in a skillful way. And the next is compassionate to the student. Unless and until you have a feeling of parental or guardian of the student, a kind of blood relationship, so that you should have unconditional, compassionate mind to the student. And then unirritable, the last is, if students put silly questions or not able to understand, at many times even you explain, you are not irritable. You can cope with the situation of student. These 10 qualities are considered to be indispensable, necessary to become a real teacher. If you have these 10 qualities, then you will be able to jointly proceed in the journey of learning with the student or students. So that is what the Buddha have taught as a quality of teacher in the realm of Pramitayana. When it goes to the Vajrayana, there are different qualifications which we need not to talk about. But this, what the 10 qualities which I have said here, is in the Buddhist tradition, that is the essential, not preferable, essential qualification of a teacher. So to become a true teacher, we shall have to examine ourselves whether we do possess these 10 qualities: Tulva, humble; Shiva, peaceful; Nyur Shiva, stable mind; Yundanlava, better knowledge of that subject, not always, and hardworking, having all kind of references, knowledgeable references, and understanding the depth of the subject, and having very skillful language through which the things be communicated or taught very easily, having compassionate, unconditioned compassionate mind for the student, and able to deal with the student in spite of difficult students or poor intellect people. You have to repeat more and more, even you are not irritable. So these 10 qualities make you a true teacher. So that is one way by Buddhist perception, Buddhist notion of a requisite qualification for a true teacher. And then in the Abhisama Alankar, there is another qualifications, not only teacher. Teacher is one word, the Guru or the Kalyan Mitra. Now here is a different word was used by Maitrinath. That different word is Samparigraha. Samparigraha means totally upholding the student. In Tibetan language we call it Yongzing. Now this Yongzing word is being used commonly for the teachers of the reincarnated lamas. For them we used to call Yongzing. Actually Yongzing, this Samparigraha, is also a substitute name to a true teacher. A true teacher means to protect, to uphold, to look after the students in totality. Samparigraha. And in this Samparigraha, there is 3 essential qualifications. The three essential qualifications. The first is Simingong Anidane. The second is Mo Nime Sotunchi. The third is Di Mitun Choborwa. Number Kuntu. There are many monks and other people who know the treatise and who know the world. They might be understood it easily and they can share with other people individually. In this, Maedranath says that the first quality, not only quality, the first responsibility to be a Yongzin, Samparikira, or to be teacher is to create unshakable willingness or interest to learn the subject. For that, you shall have to uphold or develop the mind of the student fearlessness, to be a fearlessness. Fearlessness here refers not to be afraid of learning, inquiry, or searching with a full competence. And to achieve this kind of full competence, there are four different kind of obstacles. The first obstacle is lack of enthusiasm, laziness, lethargy. The children used to have biologically or habitually a lethargy, not be willing to do hard work all the time. You shall have to remove that lethargy by creating intense interest and curiosity to go into the subject, to learn the subject. And the second kind of obstacle is a kind of a lethargy which is not willing to work but postponing. I do it tomorrow, I do it later, and I do it next week, by this kind of postponing. Chishul Jilelo. The first is Jilu Belelo. The second is Chishul Jilelo. This kind of postponement is always having in the mind of student. You shall have to remove that by giving the interest with sense of urgency. If I have to learn, I have to learn it just now, right this moment. I cannot postpone it. And the third kind of obstacle is Jawangenshin Jilelo, to be engaged in some useless thing, like indoor games, video games, or always look into a smartphone or some other things, which does not have any help to the learning process, and still consuming the time. So that shall have to be removed. And the fourth and most important is the Danyilanya Velelo. That means lack of self-competence. Many people think, oh, this is a very book, I cannot learn. This is very difficult, I may not be able to, by this way of thinking. So the teacher is able to remove that lack of self-competence and tell that every sentient being has the basic potential to become enlightened, to know everything. And that is only to be awakened by a little bit of effort. So by that way, to give a self-confidence through metaphors or through examples, by different ways to create a self-confidence is the most important. To remove this four kind of obstacle and make the student intensely interested and enthusiastic with self-confidence to learn the subject. That is the first responsibility of a true teacher. And the second is, of course, to teach the subject in an appropriate way, whatever it is easier to the student. So at length and constantly, and whatever comes to communicating in the way of teaching, or communicating in the way of discussion, in the way of debate, in the way of dialogue. So by many ways, the subject shall have to be communicated to the student. The third responsibility is, after communicating the subject, the student might have a number of obstacles and difficulties. And then the responsibility of the Yungzin, the teacher, is to remove them. The Methun Choborwa. Here obstacle means to disturbance or to kind of destruction to the process of learning. They are categorized in 4 different categories. The first is negative emotions. So many kind of negative emotions due to external causes or due to one's own inner weaknesses, such as envy, anger, jealousy, and so forth. This kind of negative emotions would disturb the process of learning, particularly in the second and third stage of learning. So these negative emotions shall have to be recognized by the student. If they are not able to recognize by the student, the teacher is able to see them and tell the student, this kind of negative emotions are disturbing in your learning process, and they shall have to be removed. How to remove them? To remove anger, practicing of metta, loving kindness. So this kind of each negative emotion shall have to be controlled by the opposite way of positive emotions to be practiced. And the second kind of disturbance is bad companions, alkayam mitra, debatable, to member. Many other people who have connection with the student might have bad habits and bad way of thinking, and which may influence the student. So the teacher shall have to protect the student from coming to close relationship with the undesirable people. And the third is lacking of facilities. Some student willing to learn something, but he or she is not able to get the appropriate related texts or instruments for experimentation or any other financial assistance to do the research or the learning work which might need some facilities. If students are need to that kind of facility, the teacher shall have to be able to assist them by finding some appropriate help or by helping by teacher himself or herself. The fourth is most important, that is losing of freedom mind, original mind. Today the world is full of things which might disturb your mind, indoctrinate or brainwash your mind through various ways. And student, a particular qualification, 3 qualifications for a student is Surnen Loden Tunyirwa. Lotan Demba means a free mind. The mind does not carried away by external factors such as advertisement or process of brainwashing or telling by other things, not losing one's own capacity to the faculty of dissentment, discrimination, and rationality, logically thinking, not to be carried away by the external conditioning factors. In today's world, our mind is largely conditioned by different ways of the social system and prevailing informations and happenings in the community. All these have effect to influence our mind, restricting them, analyzing the things independently without influence by anyone. Particularly now people are divided in the groups by racially, groups by professions, groups by so-called associations or parties. For example, political parties, they do have their own, I don't know that today, but originally political parties used to have their own political ideology, and any party member, whether he or she agrees that ideology or not, but as so-called party discipline, they have to accept those ideologies. So this kind of divisive influences. So by many ways our mind can be influenced or conditioned. So to protect the student's mind from overpowering or affecting by the external various forces, to remain preserved his or her own original discriminative power, the wisdom, the analytical mind, and able to make a decision without carried away by some factors. So these 4 kind of obstacles which might come after transmitting the teaching of the subject. So the Yongzin shall have to look after, to protect the student from these four kind of opposite forces. So these three responsibility, as I mentioned before, to encourage the student to cultivate indomitable desire and inquisitiveness to learn the subject in which the student is going to begin the learn. And for that, the four kind of disturbances shall have to be removed by the teacher. Then transmit the teaching, and after transmitting the teaching, another four kind of disturbances which might occur, they shall have to be protected from those things. And if one is able to do, then the teacher is not only teacher, it is samparigraha, upholder of the student in totality. So this kind of person might be considered as a true teacher. And apart from that, as I mentioned, the 10 qualifications of a teacher and the 3 qualifications of a samparigrahi, Yongzin. And apart from that, in the common sense, to be a true teacher must have a mindset which enables the person to transfer, to disseminate the wisdom, the insight of one's own to the other, to his or her student, without any selfishness or without any expectation of something in return. In the generosity, practice of generosity, in the practice of the dana paramita, the dana, the giving of knowledge and giving of dharma is considered to be the most important material to be shared or to be given. If you are giving the knowledge or realization to someone else with some expectation of return, such as Guru Dachana or other kind of benefit or any kind of return back in value of the sharing or giving the knowledge or the realization or the wisdom, then that will make the whole process false, and the truthness of transferring the wisdom become useless. Because with some expectation of any kind, make the thing as modern behavior. Modern behavior means just trade, marketing. If I produce this kind of material, it will be easily sold in the market, and by selling the production, I will earn much profit. So this is a trade. This is a vyapar. So the value of knowledge and the transformation of knowledge all are become diluted. To remain a true teacher, the importance of transformation of the knowledge and the importance of the knowledge not only remained with oneself, but it has to be shared with other people for the sake of other people's well-being, for the sake of the sustaining the knowledge system, and for the sake of improving the knowledge system with sharing the more and more people. This kind of intention and attitude is necessary for a good teacher, for a true teacher. So I think I have mentioned a little bit of Buddhist way of looking to a responsibility as well as the qualification of a teacher in accordance with the Shastras, treatises. And this is for your examination through your rational mind, not to be accepted as a whole. I always say Buddha have particularly instructed to his disciples. He make this metaphor: a goldsmith examines the gold's purity, putting it in the fire, cutting it by instruments, and rubbing it on stone and other material, then decide whether how much the gold is pure. Similarly, my words, the Buddha's words, should be examined by that way, through logic, through reasoning, through argument, and you find it is based on truth, then you accept it. Otherwise, you don't accept it just because it has been said by Buddha, or I have a greater reverence and devotion to Buddha, therefore I have to accept his words. That is the wrong way to receiving my teaching. So this is very different from all other teachers in India. Buddha was the alone who publicly said that don't accept my words, just simply you have devotion to me. You must examine for yourself, and you go through the three processes of learning, and you find it acceptable, then you accept it. The metaphor of the goldsmith is in the Pramitayana canon, and in the Pali canon there is a long sutta, Buddhavachan, which is called Kalama Sutta. Kalama is a place somewhere near to the Ayodhya or somewhere, and where he taught a long sutta. In that also, he very elaborately, extensively instructs these followers not to accept his words verbatim because they have devotion to Buddha. You examine them, you go through the learning processes, and when you realize it acceptable, then you realize it. So similarly, what I have submitted to you in this session, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's not an instruction, neither a teaching, it is an information shared to you which is coming from the Buddhist canon, the suttas and the shastras, and that you should consider worthwhile to examine it in depth. And by examination, by analytical examination, through your logic and rational mind, without conditioning your mind by any external force, you could examine it independently and with the original mind, then whatever you find the result. You may accept it, you may reject it, or you may modify it. That is your freedom. So I think I will stop here, and I think the remaining time will be used for your comments or discussion, observation, as ever it may be. Thank you very much for your attention.